Hello, my name is Max Oliver and I'm the event director for Ahead by Bett. Ahead by Bett launched alongside the Bett Show in March 2022 and is the dedicated event for higher education leaders and educators during the biggest week in education. We're so excited to be joining the CASECA and AICE conference and to be addressing your esteemed audience of leaders, educators and industry, all of whom share a collective aim to improve outcomes for this generation of students. Since the pandemic, institutions around the world have worked at great pace to adapt to accelerated digital transformation and the increased use of learning technologies. As we look towards a new landscape for higher education, key stakeholders across all core functions of universities must consider the right path forward amongst business models disruption and increased pressure to demonstrate value. Working to prioritise peer discussion and cutting-edge content, Ahead by Bett provides a place for the higher education community to congregate and tackle the myriad of business and pedagogical challenges faced by the sector. In today's session, we'll be sharing what key trends we've identified across the higher education sector and revisiting some of the highest rated sessions from our 2022 show. Our insights are informed by an extensive research campaign with global institutions, during which we interviewed a range of roles across the higher education community, from leaders to lecturers. Let's get started.
Hello, my name is Elle Monaghan and I'm the Senior Content Producer for Ahead by Bett. I'm going to be taking you through some of the top priorities that we've identified across the higher education sector for 2023. Our insights are informed by an extensive research campaign with global institutions, during which we interviewed a range of roles across the higher education community, including directors of teaching and learning, digital learning managers, heads of IT, heads of education, and heads of technology-enhanced learning. In this presentation, we'll take you through 6 of the most mentioned themes that came up in our research over this summer. We'll start off with navigating accelerated transformation in higher education. This was the most commonly mentioned challenge that universities that we spoke to were experiencing. Universities are still working out what best practice looks like post-pandemic, and accelerated transformation and widespread disruption during the pandemic have led to new approaches to teaching and learning. For some students, a more flexible approach to a degree is preferable, and universities can also offer students a wider range of options when designing courses, so this can be seen as beneficial. There's a real variety in how universities have reacted to disruption in the last few years, meaning that some have fully embraced new ways of working with technology, and others have chosen to revert to more low-tech options. Senior leadership teams must evaluate the different options they now have, set expectations for staff and students, and weigh up the costs of investing in new technologies across their institutions. It's likely to be some time before each institution figures out the right strategy for them, depending on its student cohorts, geographical location, and size. The next theme we're going to talk about is skills, and more specifically, lifelong learning, digital literacy, and skills for the future workplace. This is certainly a key focus for the higher education sector in the UK at the moment, where a greater pressure has been placed on universities to demonstrate value, prepare students for the future workplace, and offer them greater opportunities post-study. Across all courses and disciplines, universities must show that they are helping students to develop a portfolio of skills for future careers, including project management, digital literacy, and collaborative working. A university experience should also help students to develop as global citizens, with a strong focus on the importance of skills for sustainability and global social justice, rather than just focusing on technical knowledge. This was an essential priority that universities raised, which also looked at how we can encourage students to be not just knowledgeable graduates, but also graduates with creative and critical thinking skills. The next theme that we're going to discuss is the theme of learning analytics and digital pedagogies. This theme is all about how we can work more closely with technology in order to help us better understand the student cohort. More widespread use of technology has led to a greater focus on the role of learning analytics and the student experience. When considering best approaches to pedagogical design or curriculum innovation, educators and learning technologists can work together to implement touchpoints to capture more student data by embedding data hooks across the curriculum. Educators are then able to keep track of student learning outcomes and intervene quickly when red flags appear. Our fourth theme that we're going to discuss today is the theme of institutional culture. And here we're talking mainly about the need for universities to give staff continuous upskilling and encourage an aptitude for the unknown. It's essential that higher education staff feel confident when using technology in day-to-day teaching and learning, especially now that it's become such an integral part of the learning experience. Staff in higher education institutions had to radically upskill during the pandemic to keep students learning, and as a result, the use of technology in daily teaching and learning has increased. But it's important that technology leads within higher education institutions can support staff by helping them to use teaching and learning tools to their fullest potential. Staff should be embracing a culture of change and should also feel free to experiment with different types of technology. The best way to do this is by implementing an agile system architecture across your institution, and also by giving staff the freedom to work in the way that best suits them. The next theme that we're going to talk about today is student engagement, and the need to move away from what we're calling pajama pedagogy towards a more active style of learning. Students have been through a difficult period and require additional support to get back on track with their learning and their personal well-being. Increased independent working over the pandemic means that today's students are more likely to experience higher anxiety in face-to-face teaching environments. And when looking at current approaches to teaching and learning, it's clear that increased flexibility is probably here to stay. However, it's important to tailor your approach in different learning environments. One successful approach that we heard about is wraparound teaching. For example, providing students with a lecture where they are free to attend remotely, and then setting them a task based on further reading or research, which is done independently. The study will then conclude with an in-person discussion-based session, so that students can get the most out of contact hours with educators and peers, and encourage those collaborative working skills that we've talked about before. Our final theme that we're going to talk about today is micro-credentials and the unlocking of stackable degrees in higher education. The way that students are interacting with higher education providers is changing, and we're seeing students asking for greater flexibility from universities and being more vocal about their preferences and needs. This means that higher education institutions can consider offering shorter courses to attract a wider range of students who don't want to commit to a long 3-year course. Micro-credentials allow students to enroll in a range of stackable degrees that best suit their needs and can be picked up on a more flexible basis. They can also be more suitable for mature students, professional students, or carers who might have limited time to attend lecture hours. So, those were the 6 most mentioned themes that came out of our research this summer. Have you seen similar trends in your institution, and what do you think is coming next for the higher education sector? For now, thank you very much for listening, and we hope to see you at a Head by Bett in March.
Now we've had a chance to explore some of the top trends in higher education today, we're excited to present some of our best content sessions from our digital and in-person content library. One thing that stood out to us throughout our research was that everything starts with the learner. With this in mind, we're taking a closer look at our students across the following 2 sessions. To kick off, we'll be hearing the student voice firsthand. We invited 2 students from JISC's Change Agents Network to our studio to discuss the importance of student and staff partnerships when revolutionising approaches to learning. Let's take a look at what they had to say about the future of higher education. I'm now joined by 2 students from UCL. Molly is in their 2nd year of BA Education Studies and holds a variety of positions across the university, including Lead Department and Module Representative, Changemaker Student Fellow, Student Ambassador, and Co-President of the Education Society. Tonya is currently doing an MSc in Statistics at UCL, but also works part-time as a Changemaker Student Fellow in the UCL Education and Student Experience team, and as a Democracy Assistant in the Students' Union. That is a lot of responsibility. Molly and Tonya, welcome to Think Ahead TV. I'd love to start by you just telling me a little bit more about your respective roles and what you do.
Okay, thank you. So in the Changemaker Student Fellow role, I am kind of working with staff on quite a few different things, but one of the main ones has recently been the CAN conference, Change Agents Network conference, which we kind of helped organize and did a lot of workshops on. And then on top of that, with the lead department rep, I kind of represent students across the department on kind of at a variety of different levels and in different meetings. So that's kind of some of the things that I do with staff. Yeah.
Lovely. Tonya?
Yeah, so we share the same role as Changemaker Student Fellows. So I was also involved in the Cannes Conference organisation. But besides that, I was also involved in plenty of other projects in kind of that role. I've worked with senior UCL staff on we're doing a project on learning communities and kind of learning more about how students feel about the current environment they're in at UCL. And also I've been on a couple of student panels, kind of in a consultation setting with staff members. And in my role at the Students' Union, I'm a democracy assistant, and that kind of sounds very fancy. And I mean, I do like the role as well, but I'm kind of involved in, I guess, student politics, you would say, and student representation. So we're working on union-wide policies. We're kind of the team that helps support the academic reps, such as Molly. And I'm also, I don't think you mentioned this role, but I'm also on the EDI committee of the department I'm in. This is the 6th department. So EDI obviously stands for Equality, Diversity and Inclusion. And I'm on the student-run subcommittee of that. And we're kind of trying to improve the EDI situation in our department. Yeah, that's it in kind of 2 minutes.
Another role to add to the list.
Yes.
Nice, there we go. And you talk a little bit about the student experience. I mean, sum up for me a little bit how that's changed over the past 2 years, and your thoughts and feelings towards it, and also how it can be further improved.
I feel like the past 2 years have definitely changed a lot in terms of education and student experience. Obviously, everything has went online, which brought a lot of positive changes as well. It made lots of things more accessible. Kind of people realize that it's actually possible to record lectures and make it available even after the lecture is passed, which is really good for students who are not able to attend in person as normal. But I do think it has also posed a few, I guess, challenges, namely that education has become very impersonal because everyone's just sitting at home. And this kind of leads to isolation, and what we're seeing that lots of students tell us that they don't feel like they're part of a learning community or kind of any sort of community at UCL. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there are some really great things that have come out of kind of moving things online and using kind of digital technology in higher education to improve engagement. And I think that's something that we need to continue thinking about, but then at the same time, there's also been this feeling of a lack of community in some ways, or at least from what I've seen. And so it's really important that we kind of look at that and think about how we can engage students using the technologies that we've kind of reviewed and that we've used over the pandemic, but meanwhile kind of trying to fill in those gaps that students have found during the pandemic as well.
So in short, you think the big improvement would be if you could improve sort of the community feel of what's changed. That would be how you'd improve the student experience moving forwards.
Yeah, I think creating more inclusivity, creating accessibility to more education content, and also to kind of break down some of those walls that sometimes we see in institutions where, you know, we have students fulfilling their role as a student and teachers fulfilling their role as a teacher, when I think really we can kind of engage in new ways and think about how we can improve the experience for everyone. Yeah.
And be a little bit more collaborative as well. And I think that comes on to sort of my next question is, how can we encourage more students like yourselves to further collaborate with staff and further roles within the university moving forwards?
I would say if we're kind of expecting students to engage and collaborate, we need to be able to reach out to them and make sure that not only students who are kind of outspoken and typically kind of interested in student-staff partnerships are kind of involved, but also those who might not think of themselves as kind of a student rep or in one of the roles that we've talked about. So I think really reaching out to those and making sure that all student voices are heard or at least represented in the room is important. And that kind of also links to creating a better community and letting students know that they will have the support they need. For example, if you have someone commuting or someone who also has a part-time job on the side of their studies, that they're going to be supported enough to contribute in the ways that they want to contribute.
$1 million question: how do we get the sort of lesser spoken up voices involved as well?
I think it's about reaching out to them. I think it's about saying, we want to hear all of your voices. We want to know what you're thinking. We value student voice and we value your contribution to this institution, and letting students know that if they want to get involved, there is support there for them. And I think that's something that UCL does quite well, actually.
Nice. Okay, Tonya?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Molly said. I just wanted to add maybe one more point, that I think reaching out is a really good starting point, but we also need to make sure that students will understand and believe that by getting involved, things can actually change. Because I think actually many students have strong opinions about their education, obviously, because they are the main stakeholders, I guess. But I think lots of people are scared to get involved or just not bother because they don't think that anything could change, or don't think that just telling someone their opinion would get them anywhere. So I think we need to make sure that students feel that they are listened to, that their voices are valued, and things are actually going to happen. There is a set outcome, and that, well, I guess when there's an outcome, we should tell students as well kind of the time frame when that will happen.
Yeah.
So I think that will definitely help engagement.
And I think what benefits do you see a student would receive from working a little bit more collaboratively with staff and SLT? Where do we think we can see the student benefit there?
There's plenty of benefits. I think we both know that very well. But I think my main one is that we get to understand kind of the other side, which I guess the average student just sees as the other side, very dark, very in the dark. We don't know what's happening. Yeah. Students just really like to kind of, blame staff. Staff sometimes like to blame students. I'm not scared to say that, but I think by getting involved in these partnerships, it kind of makes you empathize more with the other side, and you understand the challenges the other side is facing. And on top of that, I think you also learn to kind of advocate for yourself and your peers as well, because you obviously need to kind of represent your whole student cohort, and gain a lot of confidence and public speaking skills.
Nice.
Yeah, I would completely agree with all of that. I think for me personally, I found a great community, as we were saying, in doing these types of things, and in building a community. I realized how important it is, and broken down some of those walls. I've realized, that we kind of both value each other's, staff and students both value each other's kind of thoughts and opinions, and if we can work together, we can create, a better experience for both sides. So yeah.
Amazing. Molly, Tonya, thank you very much for your time today. Next, we'll be revisiting a session from our 2022 show. We welcomed Educate Ventures and Arizona State University to the stage to explore how we can put AI analytics to work on student data to gain a better understanding of what is happening inside of learning. Our speakers joined us to share the innovative approaches they have taken to analysing student data, what they discovered about how and when students were learning how to learn, and what they hope to do with this information next.
What do you think was the most important finding from your point of view?
Well, I certainly think we discovered this opportunity to really focus on development of more equitable learning within ASU and really across higher education. And so when we looked at the data, and Tom and Ben can elaborate on this, but our underserved students, and so this is typically students low income or students from historically disadvantaged racial backgrounds, had lower experiences or lower learning to learn representation, and that was activity assessment and practice. And so once again, this actually, we had a very rich discussion yesterday as we were prepping for this around what are we doing wrong, right? So frequently, our tendency is to say, well, what's wrong with the students?
Right.
But it's really, what are we doing wrong, and what do we need to do to change about our system? And I think a big part of what we've learned is that maybe we need to change the way we're doing assessment. Mm-hmm. I think our traditional assessment systems really favor privileged students from those more traditional backgrounds. And yet many of our students are, particularly in ASU Online, are non-traditional. We have single parents. They're working 2 jobs. So they have many skills and assets that they bring into those courses and into the university that aren't recognized, okay, by our traditional assessment mechanisms. So this really opens up a wealth of opportunities for us, really, as we're driving this forward, really as we're trying to understand what is needed to advance our educational system, to develop that fundamental skill of the ability to be able to learn, or learning to learn. And so, Tom, did you want to elaborate more on some of those specific activity assessment and practice?
Yeah, I think I'd like to get you to engage a little bit on, as we list out these 3 bullets where we saw the gaps. Now, gaps are important. We want to be able to identify those gaps. But I think it's a very easy slide from the language of gaps into the mindset of a deficit model. As Julie said, a problem with the student that they need to remedy, or as a faculty member myself, often thinking the schools that come before need to remedy this so I don't have to deal with it. But I'd like you to say a little word about how we take that from a conceptual or from a mindset standpoint. How do you take the observation that there is an activity gap, that there is an achievement or an assessment gap, that there's a gap in their learning to learn evidence around practice? How do we take that and reconstrue that as an asset model? How do we take that equity lens that we're looking at with our data, turn it around and look at ourselves and what we did over this last 1.5 years or so with the Learning to Learn project? Any thoughts that you have on that, Julie or Ben or Lori?
Did you want to add?
I think one thought is that the underserved students will have come typically through situations which aren't measured and have skills that aren't part of academic learning to learn, but are probably very much part of life learning to learn. And so we can maybe capitalize on their extra street wisdom, for example, in doing things that we wouldn't otherwise do with them.
I mean, what I think I'm hearing come out is, this turning of the lens is, how do we reassess now based on what we're starting to learn from studies like this, how we assess what it means to be successful in a higher education setting, or what it means to achieve, and what are the factors that we want to measure. I mean, I think I would make the argument that learning how to learn is certainly one of them, and a very transferable skill that we'd love to be able to capture on an ongoing basis. But what are the other sorts of skills that we might want to be capturing or bringing into that assessment of progress, that understanding as well, and saying, what, actually we really value this, and now we have an opportunity to be able to see it a little bit better as well. So, given all of that, and this is a blank slide because we're also opening this up to all of you as well. What do you think? What other analytic tools do universities need? Like, what needs to happen next to capitalize on what's been learned in this project so far?
Well, certainly, I think we need to evolve our ontology, evolve our methodology, to have really shape and guide a more equitable education, more equitable assessment mechanisms within higher education. And I think it's not only collecting different data, but also changing the data that we're creating. And then once again, that gets back to changing those assessments, creating an assessment system and a higher education system that recognizes the assets, as we've discussed, of our underserved students. And so I think of teamwork, for example. This is one of the skills we emphasize at ASU. We have a partnership with Starbucks. Many of our Starbucks students work in an environment, and they have outstanding teamwork skills coming into ASU Online. And once again, we're not recognizing or giving them the opportunity to demonstrate that within our current assessment systems. Assessment systems are still structured to focus on that traditional campus-based students. I think you can carry that forward to, we have a very large military students and veteran students who also come in with unique skill sets that our system does not recognize. And I certainly say that as my son has recently enlisted in the Army, I'm hearing from him about what he's doing and what he's experiencing. And it's a very different skill set than what he learned when he graduated from ASU Online in the fall. So I'd love to hear different perspectives.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what you have to say, Ben and Tom, and if you have any thoughts also about what this could possibly mean for the practical, lived experience of being, a faculty member. How could, these kinds of changes that we're talking about, that Julie's talking about, change how people are approaching their teaching and learning?
So a really important part of this project that we haven't really focused on here, the methodology, was engaging the faculty. We talk a lot about engaging students, and that's obviously very important. But a mechanism toward that is to engage the faculty. So Educate came in and ran a series of workshops with our faculty through both of these pilot programs. And bringing those faculty in, not just to tell them what we were going to do, but to find out where do they have data that could perhaps bear on learning to learn, and maybe most importantly, how do they conceive of learning to learn, and how does that conception emerge through the workshops that we did? I think to pivot back to something that Julie said around our Starbucks and military students, there may be for many of us a conceptual firewall between something like learning to learn, which sounds a little bit cognitive and academic, and something like team and collaboration, which can sound a little bit more social emotional, a little bit more fuzzy. But I think as we move firmly into the second quarter of the 21st century, we're seeing that collaboration is a critical component of learning. So learning to learn, not just in the university, but in the corporate world, real life that they're going to move into beyond, involves that kind of collaboration in order to learn the new things. Most of our students, the recent study in the United States suggested that our graduates coming out now will change careers, not jobs, but careers 7 times over the course of their life. You can't come back to the university for a new degree every couple of years to do that. So learning to learn, learning how to pivot, and learning how to leverage your collaborators, your team, to be able to do that, an important 21st century skill.
If a university is going to treat learning to learn as one of its objectives for the students, it needs to be center stage. They may be learning biology, or they may be learning psychology, or they may be learning geography, but they're also learning to learn. And to help them do that, they need to know how am I doing on my learning to learn? I learned lots of learning skills at school. Are they any better? Are they any worse? We need to use some of the data that we've shown you on the slides and some of those diagrams to feed back to individual students saying, look, here's your behavior. This is how a really good student is behaving. There are bits missing in what you do, or there are bits extra that we need to work on. Likewise for the staff, if they can see how their students are doing in terms of those process mining graphs, or in terms of those clusters, they can say, okay, this person is clearly in that top cluster, not putting in huge amounts of effort, but achieving everything. let's really challenge those students. The ones who are working really hard but not achieving very much, you need a different kind of action plan. But you can't apply the action plan unless you know which cluster the student is in. So my two pennyworth is we need to have this kind of data, dashboards for students so they can see how they're doing, dashboards for staff so they can see how they should be doing, and dashboards for university administrators so they can see how is the university doing. So that the provost can then stand up, hand on heart, and say our students are learning to learn because we've got the data to show it.
And that brings us to the end of this session. Ahead by Bett will be returning to Excel London from the 29th to the 31st of March 2023 with a brand new content programme and an exhibition featuring a range of solution providers. We're also excited to announce that in the spirit of reimagining education, we're also transforming the way our community meet by launching Connect at Bett, a completely new technology-enabled meetings programme that will drive more meaningful conversations at our shows than ever before. During Bett and Ahead by Bett, over 2,000 education buyers will meet directly with 300 edtech companies for over 5,000 15-minute meetings as part of Connect at Bett. This empowers education buyers to discover the right solutions for their setting in a fraction of the time. Connect at Bett is available for free to anyone from education institutions or governments that are involved in or have influence over purchasing decisions and who want to find solutions to your strategic, operational or pedagogical challenges. We hope to see you there in March. But for now, keep an eye on our Think Ahead Hub, where we'll continue to share interviews, news and recorded sessions from our 2022 event. Check out our social media channels and subscribe to our newsletter for more information. From all of us at Ahead by Bett, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in London in March.